Well, you don't need to.
Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr Chairman, we're no longer sharing a microphone but sharing a bill, so and that was just due to the lack of. I actually thought that, and I think that's a little bit unfair of my colleague. I don't think he's paid any bills, but he does owe me big time. So I'm prepared to accept that as a future commitment to pay a bill. And I think there's a few people that he should shout for on the side of the House for a number of reasons, but we won't go there. Mr Chairman. The reason that I wanted to speak on this particular bill was because this particular measure is actually the most important measure contained within the legislation, and I believe from the contribution that my colleague has just made is that this explains in very clear terms why the government wanted to see this pushed up the order paper. And as my colleague has said, is if the government had made this clear to the opposition months ago, we would of course facilitated its passage, because it is a bill that we all worked on very closely and actually very efficiently at the Commerce Committee last year. And I have made the point a few times in the House tonight that this bill was referred to our Select Committee in February last year. And I know that the member who was my former Deputy Chair on the other side of the House is kind of smiling because he knows how it's Mr. Lotoega, sorry, yeah, and it's because he's not my deputy chair anymore, because I'm no longer the chair of the Commerce Committee, that I haven't had the pleasure of working so closely with him over recent times, Mr. Chairman. But the reason that I wanted to take a call on this is that this particular measure actually goes back quite a long way, and it was one of the things that that was picked up in something that I called the Quality Regulation Review when I was the Minister of Commerce. And the reason that I conducted that review was because Helen Clark, who was the then Prime Minister, said that it was really important that we identified what the regulatory barriers to business growth were. And so I conducted this Quality Regulation Review, which had a number of different elements to it. But what it identified relatively quickly was that there was a huge difference from the big end of town to the small end of town. And often the small end of town had these little compliance issues that were just standing in the way of them doing good business, and they wanted these little regulatory matters dealt with. The big guys, the big end of town, they had stuff like the Commerce Commission, they had things like Part 4 of the Commerce Act. They wanted to do the big picture stuff at their end of town, but it was the SMEs of this country, pretty much the backbone of a number of elements of our economy. They wanted to see these little regulatory matters attended to. And what we discovered was that individual ministers could not get these things over the line. When it came to negotiating the legislative program, they actually couldn't get them over the line. And this was one of the ones that came up back then, and of course it was something that ought to have been dealt with after the change of government in 2008 and didn't see the light of day until last year, and now we've had to wait to another term of this government to have it finally addressed. The Films, Videos and Publications Classification Act 1993 amendment is the most substantial part of this legislation. It is one that must pass. It actually enables the labelling provisions to be sensible and to be brought into the 21st century, which I have to say is about time.
The question is that Part 5 stand part, but before we do that, we have the Minister's amendments, which are set out on SOP number 118. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Part 5, as amended, stand part. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Part 6 stand part. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that part 7 stand part, but before we do that, we have the Minister's amendments, which are set out on SOP number 20. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that part 7 as amended stand part. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that part 8 stand part. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that part 9 stand part. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that part 10 stand